How's that? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call to order, please, the Education and Planning Committee meeting of FLCC for February 4th, 2026. The first item on the agenda will be the review of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will move on. Our next order of business is the enrollment update from Carol Urbatus. Dr. Urbatus.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So you have in your packet the spring update as of January 23rd. I will provide a verbal update as of January 30th, which is the first week of the spring semester. So overall enrollment, thank you. Overall enrollment is up 8% headcount enrollment, and FTE is up 5.3%. This is excluding Gemini. Gemini registrations begin February 4th and will conclude March 6th. So for our March meeting, I will then include Gemini enrollment in the enrollment report. I'll ask if there are any questions. If there are none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next order of business is student success and early progress, and Andrea Parker. Thank you. I don't want to say that.
Oh.
Got a little ahead of myself. Good evening, everyone. Late afternoon, I guess, with a bright sunshine. I'm Andrea Parker, the director of the Title III grant here at FLCC. I'm going to just kind of talk about just what the slide says, early progress and the emerging impact that we're starting to see from the Title III grant. The Title III grant is part of the Department of Education, Office of Post-Secondary Education, Strengthening Institutions programs. So that's kind of the background on that. I'm just going to talk about three main legs, thank you, of the project. The Bright Space Resource Shell that we introduced, FLCC 101 pilot that is happening right now. I'll talk more about that. And then Universal Design for Learning, which is also a component of our grant. So in 2022, there was data that kind of informed the proposal for this grant in 2023. The grant was awarded in 2024. But these were some of the challenges that were identified in the proposal. And one of them was underused support systems. And by that, what was meant by that was just advising and career counseling and just kind of a limited interaction between the faculty and student support personnel. Another problem that was identified was that 30% of first-year students were not returning for a second term. And that was, again, from the Title III narrative. And finally, the third kind of issue was that the first-year seminars were underperforming. And by that, I mean that 30% or above, there was a 30% or above failure rate in some of the first-year seminars on campus. And again, that's from the fall 2022 retention report from APCI. So those were some of the challenges that were on campus at the time that the grant was written. So the goals of the Title III grant really fall into two buckets. One of them is kind of encapsulated in goal number 1, which is to increase student persistence, retention, completion, especially for students of color and Pell recipients through the redesign and integration of the first year experience. And the second goal is to improve pedagogy and andragogy in first year seminars and to boost retention and reduce failure rates of first-time students. And all of that is located in the narrative of the grant. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to meet these goals? So with integration, the thought was that with a stronger integration of first year experience content across the board for all incoming students, and also in a way that complements the seminars that are already being taught or already on the books on campus, with a robust alignment with student support services and success coaches. With the support of improved outreach for students, advising and case management via real-time data analysis and engagement activities, but data analysis through analytics through Starfish and Brightspace. And finally, to innovate with updated professional development to ensure universal design for learning principles. That is a key leg of the grant. And FYE best practices across all modalities, college-wide. And for that last one, I'm kind of excited to say that I'm going to be attending the First Year Experience, 45th Annual First Year Experience Conference in Seattle, Washington in a couple of weeks. So I'll really be hitting that last point pretty hard. It's going to be great. So what is the timeline? So in fall of 2025, this last fall, we came up with or created an FYE resource shell in Brightspace to be utilized by all faculty. And the point of that was to support existing first year seminar courses with content from just content that would be useful for all students in their first semester of college. So content other than academic content. So how to access support services on campus. All of those kinds of functional things that students need when they're in their first semester at college. In the spring of 2026, which is where we are right now, we launched the FLCC 101 pilot, which I will talk more about shortly. And in the summer, we're thinking putting together some ideas for an FYE bridge course, which will cover some content that we're hoping will be useful for students to take in and understand before they are in the thick of it when they're starting their courses in the fall. And finally, in fall, this fall coming up, we're hoping to roll out, the plan is to roll out FLCC 101 for all new matriculated students utilizing the data and the information that we learned from the pilot. So the pilot will inform what FLCC 101 will look like in the fall. Right now, the pilot is only involving a certain number of students, and we'll talk more about that. Okay, so the pilot, FLCC 101, we see it as a strategic bridge which targets SUNY Reconnect eligible students. And we chose those students because they were a defined group of students that we knew would benefit from the content that is in FLCC 101. Reconnect eligible students, if they weren't necessarily aligned with Reconnect, it was okay as long as they were 25 or above and had no prior degree, et cetera. And the reason was because our adult students can miss early success interventions and because they're busy and they often have things going on outside of what they're doing here, and often aren't always able to take advantage of some of the success interventions or the helpful interventions early on. So we reached out to those SUNY Reconnect eligible students. The course, FLCC 101, is a low-risk, flexible, self-paced mini course that we feel fosters engagement and retention. It's 7 modules. It is can be done via HighFlex, and it is a non-credit mini course. So at this point, we don't have any external, I wouldn't say motivators, but there's nothing that's compelling students to sign up for, to register for and take FLCC 101. But we had pretty good turnout, which I'll speak to in a moment. And it's going to be interesting to see how students benefit from FLCC 101. The course is student-centered, it's scalable. We made it that way so that we could easily ramp it up for the fall for all incoming students. Of course, the design is data informed, and the success coaches are the facilitators and kind of accountability partners for FLCC 101. They're not instructors. They're just there they have their sections, and they have around 30 students per section, and they're just engaging, and there are chats, conversations, and they're just checking in. And one of the criteria for the course is that students have to meet with their success coach at least twice, and I'll talk more about that. So how are we going to assess how FLCC 101 and the rest of our initiatives are? Quantitative data, of course, from just from APCI, but also we have a survey at the end of the course, and we're hoping to glean some interesting information from that. Our goal is a greater than 70% pass rate and fall 2026 re-enrollment versus that 30% that I talked about earlier on. And, again, the results from the pilot will inform the kind of college-wide scale-up of FLCC 101, first-year experience. So it's important to have alignment with faculty and departments. FLCC 101, we feel complements the first-year seminars, as I said earlier, as well, just like the resource shell. And in that it kind of helps students with transition and confidence and engagement versus academic readiness, which is really what we determined that the seminars are more focused on. Students' qualitative responses in the narrative for Title III said that students were challenged with academic skills, with social emotional problems, and with navigating the academic environment. And so those were the things that informed the content of FLCC 101 that in addition to the seminars. All our students are receiving essential, consistent information just prior to or at the beginning of the term. That's so important. We found that sometimes students weren't being registered for their seminars until further down the road, and at that point, the information that they would need, how to access resources on campus was it was past the point of being, as helpful as it could have been. So we're happy that students are receiving consistent information before the semester when they're going to need it and early on. And also the collaboration that we have with faculty and departments will ensure that that the 2023 FYE student learning outcomes are in place, and that we're hitting on some of those outcomes in addition to what students are hearing in the seminar. So they're really hearing, in some cases, some of that content more than once, which can only help. This is just a real quick breakdown of how FLCC 101 and some of the goals of the Title III grant align to the ASA's goals. I won't go into that too detailed, but it's there if you want to research it. And what did I want to say? Oh, so the potential impact of FLCC 101 and the resource shell is, of course, improve student engagement, persistence, and completion. That's key. Faculty engagement with universal design for learning and andragogy and pedagogy shifts. And we see that happening through some of the cutting edge professional development that we will be offering as we learn more and more about what makes first year experience impactful. And finally, consistent institutional-wide first year experience content for all incoming students, which I already spoke about. So I've been talking about universal design for learning and accessibility as one of the branches, one of the key components of the Title III grant. Universal design for learning is the big umbrella, and underneath the big umbrella is really that concept of accessibility. And that was one of the key components that was written into the grant. We not only do we want to make sure that students, we're retaining students, but we're looking at some of the first year seminars and the first year experience courses and making sure that they are accessible. So Amy White is our universal design for learning specialist who is under the grant. And these are just some of the things that she has going on right now, just as part of her efforts to help the campus become just more accessible and more UDL compliant. My notes are impossibly small here, so I'm going to try and, oh yeah. So she has created, she went through a course herself, and she has turnkey a course to on campus so that faculty, if they choose to, can become accessibility leaders and champions on campus to support other faculty in their UDL efforts, I guess. She has a PDF remediation program going on where PDFs and materials that faculty are using are remediated so that they're completely accessible to students. And she has received a grant to employ some students to help with that remediation effort. Accessibility 101 and 102 are two workshops that she's hoping to provide for anyone who wants to participate in them this semester. She's got drop-in office hours for anyone who would like to know more about accessibility or UDL. And also, there were a series of Friday workshops in accessibility and UDL compliance that she and some other folks in online learning hosted on Fridays this last semester. And all of those are recorded and available on Brightspace. So I'm going to leave with this one, I guess, hopeful point of interest, I guess. The emerging impact part is that approximately 100 students are registered for FLCC 101. And of those approximately 100 students, at the time that I made this slide, it was 58% of those students those registered students had already met with a success coach. And right now that is actually more like 61%. So that is within the first week of classes. More than half of those students who have registered for FLCC 101 have made that first contact with their success coach. Of the 439, which is what I had when I made this slide, of the students not enrolled in FLCC 101, approximately 8% had met with their success coaches. So we take that as good news. We're going to continue to look at the data that FLCC 101 shows us and hope that we're on to something. So with that, I will say thank you and ask if there are any questions.
Any questions? I just had a comment. I did notice the difference in percentages.
Yeah.
And that is really amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're encouraged. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move on to resolutions. And if you will note, Penny has left for us an update on the professional service position roster. And Dr. Wesley is going to speak on that. And I think probably what we should do is move to, once he's finished, move to accept them. Okay, Dr. Wesley, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So I wanted to make a quick
Oh, we don't have
note.
to-
There
okay.
was a change that was made about some positions pertaining to the Human Resources Department. So we were just putting those on hold at the moment. So the ones that we're going to be discussing tonight are just the professional association positions. So I just want to make that update. Okay. So the first one is for the Assistant Director of Payroll and Accounts Payable. The former Associate Controller position has been retitled Assistant Director of Payroll and Accounts Payable to reflect a narrower, specialized scope. This full-time college-funded position moves from Group A to Group B in the professional association. The second position is for the Assistant Director for the Center for Student Involvement and Leadership. As part of the Academic and Student Affairs reorganization, the title of this position has been updated to align with the new departmental structure. This full-time college and student corporation funded position continues to be part of Group C in the professional association. The third role is Director of Technology Support Services. The former Coordinator, IT Services and Instructional Technology position has been retitled to Director of Technology Support Services. This full-time college-funded position continues to be part of Group A in the professional association. And the final role is Help Desk Specialist. The Help Desk Specialist was revised to indicate that this position directly supervises the student aides and part-time workers at the Help Desk. This full-time college-funded position continues to be part of Group D in the professional association. That concludes my report.
Any questions? No. All right. Then we'll move on to resolutions. Dr. Ortiz.
Good afternoon. I bring before you a resolution related to the reactivation and revision of the former AAS in Mechanical Technology program into a revised AAS in Robotics and Manufacturing Technology. This program, which I know you have heard of in the past, with the revision, I just wanted to share that it was a tremendous collaborative effort in order to respond to the needs of our employers. And I just want to extend a special thanks to Dave Roberts, who is the adjunct faculty member who was the primary curriculum developer, as well as our full-time faculty, Selim Arachi and Sam Samantha, who served as the sponsors of that program. And finally, as you consider the reactivation and approval, we would be able to offer this program beginning in the fall. Due to the extraordinary efforts of the Science and Technology Department led by Jen Carney, as well as our Curriculum Council and Academic Senate, who called a special meeting on opening day in order to move this program through. So I wanted to make sure, and even to Penny Hamilton, who accommodated our request to get this in after the board packet deadline, for your consideration. Are there any questions? Okay. May I continue with the
I was just
administrative?
going to say, please continue, just go right on through them. And if anybody has a question at any time, if you just raise your hand, Dr. Ortiz will take it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, it is my pleasure to bring before you several recommendations for administrative appointment. I know that I have put comprehensive letters in your board packet, but I just wanted to highlight these individuals who I am fully recommending for administrative appointment. So the first is Patrick Bennett, the Assistant Director of Workforce Career and Experiential Learning. Patrick's acting supervisor is Ryan Reynolds, the Interim Associate Provost of Academic Innovation and Learning Resources. Many of you have experienced Patrick Bennett in real life because he is our virtual welding lead. So many of you have experienced Patrick individually. But I would only like to emphasize his leadership in that program. He is out there at every event and just serves as a tremendous advocate and ambassador for the workforce program. Next is Rick Van Dyke, the Assistant Director of Tutoring and Learning Support. And Rick's supervisor is Sarah Moon, the Director of Library Learning Resources. And Rick recently transitioned to that department with our reorganization in ASA. And I would just like to emphasize the culture of care that Rick works to cultivate. He is inclusive and he is making a concerted effort to ensure that all students, whether online, remote, or in person, have equivalent quality opportunities to engage in academic support. The next is Adam Wadera, Automated Systems and Technical Services Librarian. Adam's supervisor is also Sarah Moon, the Director of Library Learning Resources. And Adam, the additional comment that I would like to share is he is just an inspiring individual to work with. He is creative, he is solutions and forward focused, and just brings a tremendous energy to the library, and it extends throughout the college. He's also been very involved with the students and just solid leadership moving forward. We only expect more and more great things. The next is Dara Hool. She is the Nursing Laboratory Coordinator, and her supervisor is Shayna Turner-Johnson, the Department Chairperson and Professor of Nursing. Dara, as you may recall, was recently promoted into the Nursing Laboratory Coordinator position. She was formerly a technical specialist. And the highlights for Dara is that she continues to grow and works tirelessly to make sure that she is meeting the needs of our faculty and students. And she was recognized time and time again for her commitment to not only student success, but student and employee success in her department. And the level of trust that her colleagues have placed in her is admirable, and we are thrilled to advance her recommendation. The next is Mark Peterson, Technical Specialist of Viticulture and Wine Technology. Mark's supervisor is John Faust, the Department Chairperson and Professor of Environmental Conservation and Horticulture. All of you have also interacted with Mark, as he is almost at every single event serving wine. But that is not his only role, of course, and he is very engaged, and they are a small but mighty team in viticulture. And Mark's colleagues go on and on about his collegiality, his professionalism, and the fact that he just brings joy into the workplace, and that he is very, very thoughtful about his personal reflections on his growth and the program writ large. The next and final for me, I know Carol has one as well, is Cody Wilkes, the field station manager. Cody's supervisor is John Faust, also department chairperson and professor of environmental conservation and horticulture. Cody was also promoted into his position of field station manager, also coming from a technical specialist role. And Cody's highlights are really about his inclusive, collaborative leadership style and the fact that he is consistent, accountable, collegial individual. And I think the one term that I liked that stood out to me is sustained excellence. So while he has demonstrated sustained excellence through this period, we are looking for that far into the future. So with that, those are my recommendations for administrative appointments from Academic and Student Affairs.
Any questions for Dr. Ortiz? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Ubavis?
Hello again. It's my pleasure to recommend that Dr. Adam Heidebrink Bruno, our digital content specialist in the marketing office, receive his administrative appointment. His supervisor is Kristen Accardi, Director of Marketing and Enrollment Communications. Since joining FLCC, Adam has demonstrated effective and competent performance across all core competency areas, with particular strengths in communication, professionalism, leadership, and quality of work. His self-evaluation reflects a thoughtful and reflective practitioner who understands both the day-to-day responsibilities of his role and the broader institutional context in which his work supports student success and college priorities. Adam's peers consistently highlight his collaborative approach, reliability, and commitment to excellence. Peer evaluations describe him as a respected colleague, who communicates clearly, listens actively, and contributes positively to team environments. He is recognized for his professionalism, initiative, and willingness to support colleagues while maintaining high standards for his own work. From a supervisory perspective, Adam has demonstrated accountability, sound judgment, and an institutional perspective that aligns well with the college's mission and values. He approaches his responsibilities with care and consistency, making informed decisions and proactively seeking opportunities to improve processes and outcomes. His work reflects a strong commitment to quality, integrity, and service to both internal and external stakeholders, and he continues to grow as a leader within his role. So in closing, I wholeheartedly recommend that Adam be granted an administrative appointment. His contributions strengthen the college, and I'm confident he will continue to serve FLCC with dedication and professionalism in the years ahead. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Before we move on to Dr. Orloff's presentation, you have before you the emeritus resolution. Oh, that's later.
Later.
That's later. You have to do this in the regular meeting?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right, then Dr. Orloff.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. So I'm here to talk to you about a great number of metrics that are part of the student success policy that this board passed over a year ago. This is the first time that we've looked at all of the data related to those. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about the different types of data that we looked at. But if you will allow me, I'd like to begin by thanking the folks in our IR area for their extremely hard work on this project. This is a tremendous amount of data, and they did an exceptionally good job thinking through the best ways to look at the data and to think creatively about how to bring together different data sets. So my thanks to them and for their hard work on this important project. Back to our regularly scheduled show. You all spent a lot of time being very thoughtful about what you wanted to be looking at when it related to student success. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So there are metrics, measures that fall into several distinct categories. Course completion is the first one that we'll look at. Retention and persistence, which we often look at together, but we'll be looking at it in a couple of different ways. Graduate outcomes. And then with all of those pieces and parts, thinking about both the different demographic groups and how they play out, and the trend or the overtime examination of those. And when possible, also what our peers do on similar measures. So for each of those multiple measures, we're looking at up to 3 sort of different ways of looking at something: trend, benchmark, and demographic breakout. So looking at the different demographic groups. The concept here is taken together. When we look at course completion, we understand the immediate impact that a student is having in their journey, right? The individual course. When we look at persistence, which generally refers to one semester to another semester, we look at all those courses taken together. What does that mean for going into that next piece? When we look at retention, which generally looks at going into another year, then we look at one step further. And when we look at graduation, we look at that end state. And when we look at graduate outcomes, we look at what all of that means. So you all spent the time to pull this together and think about student success, not singularly, but as a part of the student journey. And that's what we'll be looking at together today. So the first area that I want to talk about is course completion. Specifically in this case, the idea of course completion by modality. 10 years ago, we might have just talked about course completion. And we wouldn't necessarily have been talking about the fact that our students take courses in a variety of different ways. So they take face-to-face courses, represented in the green color on the screen. They take online asynchronous courses, represented in that sort of reddish orange color. And they take Gemini. Those are the sort of 3 main buckets. Dr. Ortiz will tell you there are many other categories. Those are not easily disaggregated by in our current data. So you'll have to wait. And probably actually wait. We'll have to go through a full cycle before we'll be able to disaggregate by all of the different modalities. But that still gives us a really reasonable understanding. The blue on your screen looks at everything all put together. So what we see overall here is a move when we look from 2020 to 2025 that our course completion in general has gotten better, and our course completion in online asynchronous, which traditionally is much lower, than face-to-face, or traditionally has been much lower than face-to-face, is improving and actually in some cases is higher than our face-to-face. So when we take all of that sort of as a takeaway, what is it we're looking at? We have been improving course success overall. So all of that is improving. But at the same time, we've really seen a shift in what I've been sort of lovingly referring to as the center of gravity, meaning more and more of our courses have moved into an online modality or a modality that is in some way digital. And that could have been a real threat to course completion, but in fact, we've seen an improvement overall and especially in online. And that's a really important piece of good news. So as we move from course completion, remember course being the first level of things we're looking at, and now we're going to move into looking at retention and persistence. We really want to look at retention in a couple of different ways, and we'll show you those different types of measures as we move through. Traditionally, and when you're out there sort of in the world talking to people about retention, they're only looking at first-time, full-time students. And again, a few years ago, that was all that FLCC looked at as well. We made the decision in conjunction with the board at the time to also start looking at what we call all student retention. And that means, and I will show you the difference here as we proceed through, that while we do look at first-time, full-time, and we want to look at first-time, full-time also because if you look up any publication, whether SUNY or national, about retention, that's what they're going to talk about. So we want to understand what is being reported and what is being said. But for decision-making and for understanding our students, we recognize here at FLCC that it's very important to understand what all of our students are doing and not just first-time, full-time. The consequence of that, though, is I have 18,000 slides on retention to talk to you about because we look at it in more than one way. So bear with me here a little bit. Okay, so as I said, the technical term for retaining a student from semester to semester is persistence, meaning has the student persisted from fall to spring. Now, on this particular slide, I have put in bright neon yellow the scales because the scales are different in each of these. We tend to retain higher from fall to spring, a one semester retention, than we do from fall to fall. So we're more likely to have what is referred to sometimes as summer melt, meaning we lose students over the summer. That being said, overall, despite the fact that there's a lot of crazy lines on that screen right now, overall, what we see is a story of recovery. Those dips that you see in those lines are all during the pandemic. So what we want to see is that recovery, even if it's not perfect, we want to see the recovery coming out of that pandemic. And that is a consistent message across all of our subpopulations. So when we look at this next screen and we are looking at that persistence over time a little bit more closely, the takeaway message that I want you to focus on here is overall retention trends have shown sustained improvement, not always perfect improvement, but sustained improvement. The trajectory or the slope is up and consistent in that direction. Early persistence, that means fall to spring, has rebounded more quickly than year to year. Now, we just heard from Andrea Parker and the Title III work. I can't necessarily separate out that at the same time as we're rebounding from this great pandemic, we were also starting First Pace, which has now been sort of taken up by Title III. So we have been very directly and specifically engaging in particular in that first semester persistent story. Because if we can get them to stay from fall to spring, we're much more likely to get them to go fall to fall, right? It's a journey that we need to keep them going on. If we lose them at the very beginning, it's much harder to get them back. So we know there's an intervention in here that's probably also helping. Over the course of the next few meetings, the Dr. Ortiz and others from ASA will continue to be talking about all of the various academic support projects that are going on that help contextualize these data. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. We're really just looking at where we are. But in this particular case, also having just heard from Andrea Parker, it's important to point out that we spent time, energy, money, resources, all those things on saying, we know this is important. And it is likely having an impact because we do see a sustained trajectory. Okay, so what do the data show for students of color? Now, we want to look at lots of different subcategories, but we've had many conversations over the years that you and I have been talking about these items and talked about the fact that our students of color were not persisting or being retained. So a major measure of success at the same level as our white students. So this becomes an area similarly to the conversation we were just having about, we know we have trouble with our first semester students where we think, okay, what do these data tell us? What does it mean for what we need to do? So big picture, one of the things that is really key here is the students of color are re-enrolling at higher rates. Sustained equity is going to require long-term continued work, but we see initial rebound and actually a greater level of growth in that rebound, in that retention and persistent story than we have seen in all students. So they are being impacted at a greater level. That doesn't mean we're yet at complete equity. It means that the work we're doing is having an impact and it's raising that up, and that overall is raising everybody up. Students with disabilities are also a subpopulation that we always want to look at. And I think this is one of the most critical findings that we have. Students with disabilities persist at higher rates in both short and long-term measures, fall to spring, fall to fall, fairly consistently. There's a little bobbling here and there, but really pretty consistently. And what that begins to tell us is structured supports and accommodation help, because students with disabilities are provided because of their disability with structured supports and accommodation. So that's why that's an important finding, not just because we want to know we're serving those students well, because we can always do better, but that it's telling us that that structure is something that may help other populations as well. Okay, adult learners versus traditional age. Particularly important in considering SUNY Reconnect and the emphasis in general that has been on adult students in the last couple of years. These data do not have SUNY Reconnect students in them yet because they just started. So again, overall, what we see here is that we have early persistence gains. That doesn't necessarily always translate to them being able to be retained in the long run. So short term, we're doing very well with this population. We have some work we need to continue to do for that longer term retention story. That, again, if we think about this population where there are very often family obligations and they're much more likely to have an interrupted journey than a traditional age student, makes sense and helps us think about What are we doing here that we need to be doing here? First gen, a little under 35% of our students are first generation. One of the biggest things we know in education is experience matters. Students who have a parent who has attended college is much, much, much more likely to attend college and to graduate from college. It's a consistent finding in the field of education and has been a consistent finding for over 3 decades. That is very rare in education that I am able to say something like that. So it is important that we know we are accessible and serving first generation students in high numbers, and also how they're doing, can we help them do better? So first gen students are showing encouraging short-term persistence gains in the last few years, and we are still struggling with that longer term story. So again, when we think about some of the interventions we've put in place, we've really focused on that short term, and that is showing an impact. So the what's next is how do we continue to move that forward? Another important demographic, Pell recipients. Pell is broadly used in higher education as a proxy for economic need. In this case, we're really looking at students who receive Pell as a particular measure, because that's usually what is widely reported as opposed to just being eligible for it. There are different ways of looking at it. Overall, we're seeing a very similar story. That short-term persistence is solidly improving, and the long-term retention is rebounding. As I said, that's our overall story, but there is less rebound and more opportunity for improvement in that fall to fall retention story. So just a couple of key takeaways. There's a challenge to persistence over time, and that is most likely because life is complicated. So when a student comes in and is Pell eligible and maybe is also a student with disability, is also first gen, all of these intersectionalities present different risks and different needs for the student. They also can compound over time. So it is not a singular solution, and it's not a momentary solution. It has to be a solution that helps and responds flexibly to the ongoing challenges that students may face as they continue on their journey. If we think about our own lives, that makes sense. We know different challenges come to us at different times. Vulnerable students have less infrastructure and support to be able to manage that as they're trying to continue with their education. Okay, I mentioned we were going to look at retention in more than one way. So I want to just quickly take a look at what we call cohort retention. Cohort retention is that official retention, right? That's that first time, full time. What are we talking about? And there's a lot of consistency in our story. We don't see a vastly different story with our cohort retention. The students of color do show disparity in long-term retention in both the cohort and in the all student retention. So it is helpful to see that confirmed because those students do start all at the same time. So you're following them very consistently, and it allows you to understand that pipeline a little bit more. If we saw a huge difference in these numbers, that would tell us something else about where we may be having problems. Again, there is recovery, there is improvement. We just still have work to do. And same in students with disability. The advantage also narrows over time. So again, with students starting at exactly the same point as we keep following them, the advantage of that structured support is greater at the beginning, and it narrows when in comparison to non-disabled students as we move forward. Possibly saying that they get accustomed to the structure, but it may also mean that we need to look at the intervention and look at whether or not there needs to be greater emphasis, again, in that sort of later retention. Okay, so I'm going to move on to looking at graduation. So we've looked at courses, we've looked at semester, we've looked at year, and now as we think about the end of our 2-year time period, we get to graduation before we then go to graduate outcomes. So overall, our on-time completion, that means within 100% of the time, so 2 years. Our completion rate has remained stable, and it very much aligns with peer institutions. You don't see very much difference between any of these numbers. It is not the full range, though, of their success, and I think that's important. We know that community college students are much more likely to need longer to complete. Again, officially, this is what's asked for. That 100% rate is what's reported. But we know that this isn't everything the students do. Many of them take 150%, 200%. They stop in, they stop out. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not graduating. But we have a lot of consistency with this number. When we look at extended time, our rate increases modestly. So we are catching more students in that expanded 3-year completion rate, and we're still broadly within the same rate as our peers. There's not very much actual difference if you look at the scale. Another key piece to all of this is looking at transfer rates. Transfer means they left our institution to go somewhere else, and that's still success. If their goal was to transfer somewhere else and they transfer, we want to consider that an end outcome, right? So overall, it's a measure of mobility, not necessarily of their success ultimately at the 4-year level. But our transfer out rate has increased modestly across recent cohorts and is in an upwards trend. Broadly, all of our peer institutions are around the same. So before I talk about outcomes by program pathway, I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I mean by pathway. So we have about 3 different kinds of credit-bearing programs. We have a number of other options within workforce. So transfer programs are intended for students to go on to a 4-year degree. They are AA or AS degrees. Does not mean all students want to transfer, does not mean all students will transfer, but those degrees are considered transfer pathways. Career programs are AASs, and they are considered to be a terminal degree. Does not mean students won't transfer or can't transfer, but their intention is to prepare for a career. And then we have certificate programs, all of which have to ladder directly into one of those programs. So transfer programs are really consistently moving students forward onto further education. We have a very consistent story about programs that are identified as transfer programs successfully moving students forward. And then career programs also have good outcomes, a stable story. The certificate programs we did report on because they are officially reported on. The size of our cohorts in our certificate programs are extremely small. So they're really not particularly helpful in looking at this, and they nest directly into a program. So you can look at that program and still have a relatively good idea about
Small meaning 8-10%?
No, less, considerably less. Yeah, our certificates tend to be small in general. There are a couple of exceptions to that. We have a couple that are larger, but by and large, they're small programs. Okay, so we're going to move on to talking about outcomes after graduation. So what happens when our students take their degree and they go? Before I go into these data, I do want to just broadly say it's a little bit like the holy grail in education research. Everyone wants to know, well, how are students doing? Did this matter? What are they doing? How much money do they make? Do they get a job? Are they successful? All of those things. It's also extremely hard to measure. Really, really, really hard. Because we can't necessarily put a tracker on all of the students, right? Traditional ways of measuring that are using surveys, reaching out to students, asking how they're doing, self-reports. Very, very hard to get students to reply to things like that. In recent years, there have been more sophisticated measures using Department of Labor, usually Department of Labor data, where the students' W-2s are tracked, and that theoretically gives you a better idea of employment. And the biggest issue with that is those data are usually aggregate, so you can't say John Smith, John Smith. You can only say FLCC, FLCC. And that is much harder to know whether and what it means. And sometimes you can't even do FLCC. You could say SUNY or this region or something like that. So while I think these data are very helpful and I think they're really important for us to be talking about and thinking about, I think it's important for us to also know there are limits to what they can tell us. And I'm pretty comfortable with saying this gives us a good direction. This gives us a good thing to talk about. It's not causal. Education data is never causal. And we want to remember that the contexts are complex, and it's more like they give us a direction than they give us an answer. So what we did here was try to get really creative. You asked us to start looking at graduate outcomes, and you also asked us to consider in particular the ALICE data, and I'll get into that in just a second. So what we did was we looked at New York State employment data, and we checked that with a particular time horizon around graduation. So we could look at a particular time similar to the other things that we were looking at today. So 5-year time period. And then we also looked at the ALICE data and used that to contextualize what we were looking at. This will make more sense in just a second, hopefully. Okay, so ALICE data refers to asset limited employed folks, and it's not a poverty measure. It's talking about sustainable wage. Can a family, can an individual live with all the bills they might have, childcare, internet, all the things that go into a sustainable life? What is the threshold that they need to be earning in order to have that sustainable wage? The ALICE wage level in New York City is vastly different than the ALICE wage level in Ontario County. The ALICE wage level near Albany, vastly different than Ontario County, and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of context that we have to consider. But again, that idea of direction and generally understanding. So what we are able to say with reasonable assuredness is FLCC graduates show steady earnings growth over time. That upward slope is very consistent and goes up quite consistently. It also tells us that we are having quite quickly, students who graduate are at a sustainable wage. They're above the ALICE level within a year. It takes considerably longer for them to get to a level where they are supporting a 4-person family. It takes a medium amount of time for them to get to a 2-person family. That is in general what you would expect. And then you would generally, we look at 2-income households. So when you get to that 4th level, you're doubling your income, again, generally. So this gives us a good understanding that our students graduate, are earning a sustainable wage, and continue to grow their earnings over time in a consistent and sustained manner. That is good news. As we continue on, we can also look at comparisons with peer institutions. What I want to show you here is the contexts are different. So each of these colleges are in different economic labor spheres than we are, but our numbers are very close together, really, really tightly together. What that tells us is, in general, when we look at comparably sized institutions, we did not look at, for example, MCC, because they're much larger than we are and in a vastly different economic market, even though, yes, there is some overlap. But what we see here is that these schools are telling a similar story. That doesn't mean we can't do better, but it does mean we're doing something right, and we're all working on that upwards trajectory for improving students' lives and ensuring a sustainable wage. That's a good story and an important story for economic development. Go ahead, sir.
Does any of the data take into consideration further education beyond FLCC? Wage data.
Yes. One could do the same comparison that we did here. These are 2 different data sets, right? Alice is different than the DOL data, but you could look at students who go on as a separate group, knowing that, again, I can't do a 1-to-1. I can't look up John Smith and look at John Smith's trajectory. What I can do is tell a more broad story about, okay, if you transfer, if you have a 4-year degree, then this was the bigger story that we saw. Okay. It's not a super easy story to tell, but it could be something we could look at more specifically.
It's really tough to get at.
Yeah, but there's more and more data available around this because a lot of people are working on it. So as those data become more accessible, it becomes easier for us to start looking at things. But I can look at it more specifically and get back to you about the degree of confidence I would have in the data. Okay, so where are we? What we have concluding out here is that the data are showing that we have strong instructional foundation and early student momentum. Some of these interventions, there's evidence that they are working, that they are starting our students off well, and that they are helping and helped us rebound and have all of those numbers. In your mind's eye, if you were to just think about all of the bazillion different slides I showed you, I would imagine, and this is what happens to me, no particular number can stick out, but the fact that every chart you looked at went like this should be something that you can see. And that's the consistent story. There's a consistent upward trend, and we see that in particular with early momentum or early persistence. That is helping raise all of our results. What are some things we need to pay attention to? The recovery is uneven and it's not fully equitable, right? We've had some up and down in different populations, and we have some populations that need more or more specialized support. But what is universal is we have seen that overall upward trend in every single group, just not at the same level. And the other big piece, I think, here, particularly when thinking about the ALICE data, is that long-term outcomes do take time. it's not an instantaneous piece. It is a piece that they immediately are getting, or relatively immediately getting into a sustainable wage situation, but building that long-term success and long-term income pattern does take some time. So I know that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
First a
Okay, go ahead.
comment. This is a lot of work and a lot of data. No, and to you and the
I
team
will
folks.
pass that on
Yeah, this
to the
is
team.
not insignificant. And what it tells, at least me, is that not only have you gotten to this point, but the ability to look year to year going forward. You now have this substantive foundation. So my specific question is maybe not for today, but I'd be interested in you or any of your colleagues' perspective on the effect of learning during COVID.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Spent a little time with looking at an NIH and a Lumina Foundation information that came out late last year that looked back at 23 and 24. And it was around college readiness. It was around recovering learning, I think is how it was described. And the effect specifically on two-year college institutions, certainly four as well, but the 2 years. And there was a cause and effect that was concerning.
Yeah.
And
I think that's
and
accurate.
I guess I'd leave it at that. It seems to be relatively new and raw in that it's only a couple years, but the fact that some folks are taking a look at it and most are really interested in what the effect maybe has been here. Maybe it's still too soon, but I'm curious if there's been any additional work having to be done by our staff and our professors as those students have come into a two-year college setting. So when I hear all of this data, it's maybe not specific, but it does seem to have this overlay effect that may or may not be out there, and just a perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do think, I've talked quite a bit about COVID recovery and the need for us to rebound from that. We've successfully rebounded, but there's an individual student story, which I believe you're also referencing. One thing that we have seen is, one, we've had a couple of semesters, not consistent, but we've had a couple of semesters where we've had a greater number of returning students. Returning students are students who have stopped out. So they came here or came somewhere, stopped out, come back. And to the degree we can investigate that and know, which is really making some assumptions based on what we see, one of the things that we saw is some of those students are students who dropped out during COVID. So they didn't necessarily come here, but they came somewhere and found that it wasn't for them in that time period of their life. And now they're returning. And I think that's a story that we'll continue to see. And I know that's not in that report. They were looking more at learning loss, but I think that's an interesting story as well. And Dr. Ortiz can speak more eloquently about this than I can, but I do think that broadly in the instructional sphere, we have seen changes in students in the last few years as they have also dealt with the impact of having, particular traditionally aged students, have dealt with the impact of having been remote during their K-12 formative education. To the degree that will continue, I think is hard to know. It's something we need to continue. Do you want to say anything?
No, but I think it does depend on
Where they were in their journey.
Yep.
So, I mean, thus far, we have seen those that were in high school, right, have come through, but we haven't seen the ones that were, in those peak learning years for reading. So we have yet to see
Those students.
the full impact.
Yeah. And it would be first really in 2 years that we would have students who had upper elementary when COVID hit. So that particularly as we're referencing reading, when we look at assessment results in K-12, as well as speaking with our K-12 colleagues, which all of us do fairly regularly. We have seen a decrease in assessment scores, and we have seen that the recovery around reading and math, which are the, two main areas we tend to look at, has been a struggle. So we'll see.
Of course, you're on it and you're aware.
Yeah.
You don't surprise us, so thank you.
It's a good question.
Any other questions for Deborah?
Question.
Go ahead.
When you distinguish students of color, does that include everybody that does not identify as white, non-Hispanic?
Yeah, we do disaggregate in other situations. The numbers are low, so we also have to be careful about that. So we don't always report publicly around those disaggregated data. But we do, in certain circumstances, we disaggregate fully. In general, when we're presenting in a public situation, we don't.
Other questions? Deborah, thank you very much.
Not a question, just a statement.
Sorry.
And first off, I do want to thank again Trustee Martin for what you said and recognizing all the work that went into the data. I think the other thing to acknowledge for the future, hopefully in the fall, I believe it is, some of our challenges getting data that is helpful to us. And we have the Richmond Federal Reserve study that we bought into to be able to see about getting a more consistent set of metrics to be able to measure our student success. And I think that'll be interesting to see how we can compare with those data in the fall when we get our first cohort of data from that. And it should be much, I won't say much more, but it should be more precise than some of the ways that we're able to measure the data that you're interested in now.
A little more regional.
Regional, but also precise, for instance, in wages and scales and where students went to and so forth.
It's a much broader comparison than has previously been done, and it's specific for community colleges, which is not what other comparisons are.
You said Richmond Federal Reserve?
Yeah, Federal Reserve Bank. In fact, we had a meeting with them today looking at some of the data structures to make sure that everything's lined up with that. Good people doing some really interesting work. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
If no one else has any questions, would someone like to move to adjourn education and planning? And second by Jeff. All right, all in favor? All opposed? Meeting is closed.
Thank you, trustee guys. Appreciate you stepping in. Trustee Martin, Finance and Facilities.
Good evening, or good afternoon. Welcome. We'll call to order the February 4th Finance and Facilities meeting. Welcome. And we'll start off by reviewing the December 3rd minutes. First of all, Jeff, thanks for stepping in and leading that committee meeting, and also to Penny for constructing our minutes. Any comments or questions about December 3rd's committee minutes? Seeing none. Jason, you've got a long list of items here with your name attached to it, and this quite possibly might be one of our last looks at the 24-25 budget year.
Well, we'll have one more, but when we review the financials in March.
Take it away.
So these are the results as of August 31st. These do include any audit adjustments that occurred over the past few months as in relation to the audit. So not much changed from previous results, but I did want to give a final look at it as we are now going to move into 25-26, but we did add a little over $1 million to the fund balance. Some of that was a result of a little bit of an increase in our enrollment FTEs last year. Interest income also had a large impact on that, and then some vacancy savings, faculty retirements and stuff that occurred during last year. So,
Questions about the revenue side? I just had one.
Yep.
If you could just remind us again, most miscellaneous revenue is part of that interest income. Is that in that number?
Yeah.
What other some maybe highlights?
There's some other fees that are also associated in there. The fee line that's indicated in revenue is your technology fee. It's your state aidable fee. And then you have your miscellaneous revenues, course fees, nursing assessment fees and things like that. So.
My other question is the non-residents. That seems to be a difficult one to gauge or understand. And how do we go about that?
So that would look at our international student population. That's the additional tuition that we charge to our out-of-state as well as our international students, as well as students that don't submit a CR, or they may not have been a resident in New York State for over a year. So,
Final questions on the revenue. Expenses.
Expenses, salaries again in line. As you look at your faculty salary line, the instruction support, most of that is faculty, but there's also some other support. Maybe I'll scroll down. Some of that is vacancies that we had in nursing as well as other departments. So that's why we have a difference between our budget and actual. She's trying. But then you see an increase or a little bit larger in our adjuncts and overloads. So some of those savings that we see in the instruction line, we support with adjuncts and overloads in our faculty line. So student services in line, same with fringe. So
Questions on the expense side? Jeff, did you have one? Okay. Final comments on 24-25. We are waiting an audit.
Yep. We're just buttoning up the statements. We'll have our presentation of the financial statements to the audit ERM committee here at the end of February. And then hopefully we'll be approving those in our March meeting. So
This fiscal year.
Big things when I look at revenue for this fiscal year. Do we flip to this fiscal year? Nope, this is it. Just have to.
There it is. Expenses, there we go.
So this fiscal year, a lot of our increase when you compare year over year, that increase in our tuition, almost 1.6 million is SUNY Reconnect. That has had a significant increase. FTE increase in the fall was about 3%. As Carol had mentioned earlier, it was about 5.3 for the spring. Winter also saw an increase in our FTEs. So that's really driving any of that revenue as we compare year over year in that metric. So other than that, chargebacks, we had some additional chargeback revenue compared to last year. Again, I think SUNY Reconnect population has helped to drive a lot of that difference. So
Non-residents, $500,000.
non-residents, that is typically higher at the beginning of the semester
Oh, it is.
as people are getting their CRs in. So
Right.
once they supply their CRs, that will come back down. Last year we were about $1 million, about 1.4, so it could be timing. That's throwing that. So
Same issue timing with the sponsor.
sponsor, I think the 4,500s is just a calculation or a formula. So, but the sponsor will get that in February or probably March and April timeframe. So we didn't have anything last year. So at this point,
Questions? This year's fiscal year revenue. Expenses.
expenses,
Please.
in line with where we are with budget. We're about a third of the year through. The adjunct overload lines are always a little bit higher just because of when those occur. But overall, I think we're doing well as far as salaries and benefits. And the same with equipment, supply and expenses and utilities. Utility costs keep rising, so that's why you're going to see a difference year over year, some timing difference as well. And then for supply and expense, year over year, a little bit lower this year, but we did book prepaids in December of 24 last year versus January of 26. So it's just a timing difference of when we have expensed that. So
Questions on the expenses? Final comments on this year's 1/3 of the year?
again, I think we'll probably have a very strong year for 25, 26, mainly driven by our reconnect. As we put the budget together last year, the state was just finalizing their plans for what they were anticipating, and then hard to predict what that meant for FLCC. So reconnect has really driven a lot of that revenue increase. So
Thank you. We'll move to resolutions. You've got 7.
Yep.
Right ahead and proceed.
the first one is to accept a quote for the Association of College and University Educators to help all individuals at the staff and faculty for professional development opportunities. So it's $60,000 for a 2-year subscription.
Questions? Again, encourage trustees. You have a question on any of these resolutions, just raise the hand. Keep on going.
The next one is to approve the tentative collective bargaining agreement between Ontario County, FLCC, and FLCC CSCA. This is a 4-year contract. There is a revision to the resolution. We had too many 3-year contracts, so we threw a curveball at us and put a 4-year contract in there. So that resolution will be modified here. But, overall, within the limits that we had been approved by the board. So, I think it was a great negotiation and working through that with them.
Good. Well done. Keep on going.
The next one is to accept the real property from the Canandaigua Area Development to be held in trust by the County of Ontario for the benefit of Finger Lakes Community College. This is for the Culinary Arts Project. So this is for us to accept and then the county to hold in trust.
Has the county acted on this as well, or are they waiting for our?
County did act on it in their supervisor meeting last month.
Questions, comments?
It's great.
Great. Next.
The next one is, this is to replace a almost 40-year-old boat for electric fishing. John Faust has done a great job piecing together the 1990 boat, but he finally ran out of patches, and I think sent the motor 3 times over to Seattle, and they couldn't even fix it. So, I think we got a pretty good use out of that one. So this one is to accept the quote from Smith Root. This was the previous electric fishing boat. John did some due diligence and research on that and found that these were, something he wanted to go with, and got the quotes from a couple different companies. But
No one's touching that one. Okay, keep
Okay.
going.
so hopefully you can get another 40 years out of that one. So.
Go on.
Next one is to renew our lease agreement between FLCC and Thousand Silver Lake. This is for our Newark campus center. This is to extend this for another 5 years, increasing rent by $5,000, approximately $6,000 each year from what we currently pay.
Is it tied to a percentage or just a flat amount?
I think it was a flat amount.
It looks like.
Yeah, I don't think he had, the way I looked at it, it was just about, $5,000 each year, even from the previous lease agreement as well. So
That's nice bound revenue. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
The next one is to adopt the findings of the seeker regarding the updates to the 2024 Facilities Master Plan. So recently, we had the master plan revised, that was prepared back in 2024. I think this board approved it in August, and then we had, environmental review done of it. The county is the lead agent on this, but we just have to approve their recommendations of being the lead agent. Nothing was found. But the changes to the master plan were the remodeling of our student accounts area as well as bookstore on the first floor of the main campus, and also to incorporate the culinary arts project. SUNY and the state do look at master plans to see if those are built in there. So we wanted to make sure that the Culinary Arts Center was in there, included. So it just gets through the approval process at the state level a little bit easier. But because of the revisions, we have to go back through the seeker, environmental review. The county is the lead agent, but this is just to have this board approve that. So.
Are we recalling correctly that maybe Joan and Don, you were part of that facilities master plan originally? Was it two of you? Was it Jeff?
Jeff.
Jeff?
Yeah, just jog my memory. Where's the greenhouse project in that plan?
Greenhouse was already incorporated into that, into the master plan.
In any specific year or sequence or?
The greenhouse, we've received final state approval we had submitted a CIP or a project last year to begin the design of the facility.
Okay.
So anticipation is to start that this summer in order to get that moving. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So it was in the first 5 years of that plan. That was one of the top
Okay.
things.
Go ahead, Fred.
Tom Harvey presented on,
You might want to hit your microphone there as well in the center. Well, in the center.
Down.
Yeah.
No,
The other one?
on the bottom.
Bottom?
Yeah.
How's that? Is that
Yep.
closer to it?
now press one.
No, no,
No, you're on.
I feel like I'm at home.
Clicker. You're good. Talk right in.
Yeah, at the organizational meeting on Friday, I think it was January 2nd, no, maybe one of the meetings, previous meetings, Tom Harvey did it. He presented the required public presentation, and there was no comment. Did a nice job of showing the updated and all the graphics, presentation, narrative.
Thank you.
Just wanted, that was a requirement, and it was met, so.
Thank you. Any other resolutions?
It was just the last one was the approval and adoption of the updates to the master plan.
Final comments on resolutions from the trustees. Informational item,
This is renewal for our mail courier services that runs between the campus centers and Ontario County. The next one is our professional printing services that marketing utilizes. We can't produce these in-house, so we do send that to an external firm.
the budget transfer.
And the last one is a budget transfer between departments, just making sure that the lines are balanced.
Final questions of Jason? Still got the mic. Anything else from you?
We are beginning our grade negotiations this Friday, so that does begin. Hopefully in a short time, I will be back up here to get acceptance on that agreement.
Thanks. Thanks as always.
Yep.
Entertain a motion to adjourn this committee meeting, please. So moved by Fred. Second, please.
Second.
Second by Joan. All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman Don.
Thank you, trustee Martin. I'd like to call the Board of Trustees meeting to order. Is there anybody online?
I thought maybe Rich might say something.
Shaking his head.
This is a joke. Nobody's ever spoken.
Nobody, thank you. Trustee guys, would you like to do that now?
The, resolution.
The resolution.
Okay, if you look at the, resolution that Penny passed out before the meeting, and it's really just a grammatical issue. And if you go down to letter B, criteria nomination, and it says distinguished in managed service required for emeritus or emeriti. So we're just gonna make that little change. Any question? Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions? Okay. Learning curve. All right.
Thank you.
Do we need any motions on that and so forth?
Is that,
In the consent
Penny, can
agenda.
that become part of the consent agenda?
Yes.
It's on the list. Okay.
Thanks.
So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda minutes and resolutions.
No move.
I'll second.
Second.
Trustee Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We have any old business? Other than that,
Good evening. First off, good evening. First off, I'd like to recognize the efforts of Dr. Ortiz and all the folks that made our opening days last Friday, or Friday before last, a great event. When you're crunched in it one day prior to classes starting, doing all the activities needed to get done, prepare for classes. It was an exceptional day. Thank you to Dr. Ortiz and everyone that was involved. That's a college-wide effort. So thank you for that. Also wanted to, there were some other positions that, besides what Dr. Ortiz talked about that we are pursuing. Faculty-wise, there is besides the new robotics program, but we need to pursue a faculty member for the robotics and engineering technology program. Also, a new faculty member to help support the computer sciences department and support of artificial intelligence activities. And one of the things I would highly encourage you to take a look at in terms of the opening days presentations, and I put in links for you, were the presentations of all the different faculty and staff members that presented on what they are doing to utilize artificial intelligence and what they do. Really exceptional, the work that's being done, helping to be spearheaded by the artificial intelligence think tank, led by folks like Dr. Ortloff, Ed Kelty, and Professor Dave Gaddu. So thank you for that. We also have a new assistant provost for curriculum and instruction to help support greater support for our faculty in terms of efforts to help students, as you were just hearing earlier in tonight's presentations. We also have a new assistant director, assistant registrar. It will help with the needs of additional tracking items that we need for instance, SUNY requirements for credit for prior learning, and also for workforce development with the short-term Pell Grant. I'd like to highlight two things. The short-term Pell Grant that we've talked about is going to be exceptionally helpful for our college and our community, but it's also going to be onerous in terms of the amount of support that we need to make sure that financial aid is taken care of, and also tracking the metrics that are required to have the programs to be funded by the Pell Grant funding. And as such, I directed that a new position be developed, which is the Associate Provost for Workforce Development and Lifelong Learning, which will take in lifelong learning, our GEDs and our ESL programs and things of that nature. But we really need to elevate our game for workforce development and also make sure they're closely connected under the provost for laddering into credit programs and things going on. So it was time for us to elevate our activities for workforce. So hopefully that will do that. We'll have some challenges in terms of getting started with the Pell Grant programs. And basically, if we're not ready, then we won't be able to work through the Pell Grants. We'll do it as we're doing now for those short-term programs. But I think we'll get there, but it may be a rocky road. We just need to know that we can't jump in too fast, and we may have to do things as we do for a certain period of time, and that's fine. That's also based on we have some absences right now we need to fill. one of being the workforce director position, and now the new associate vice provost for workforce development activities. I wanted to highlight and congratulate the board for recognition at the upcoming April American Association of Community Colleges, AACC, for being one of 3 nominees for a national award for Trustees CEO relationships. It's a direct reflection of the great work that the board does. Thank you for Dr. Ortloff and our friend for working the legwork to get a submission in for that. But what I'm really excited about is our continued increase of participation in AACCT, American Association of Community College Trustees, where we have 3 trustees and our student trustee going to Washington, D.C. for legislative advocacy and professional development next week. And we had an additional presentation last fall for AACCT. For the spring this year, last year we had 1 presentation in AACC. We have 3 this time around, and more people going. It is an exceptional professional development activity, and really looking forward to how that goes. I am very excited and proud that we're growing our participation, particularly for professional development and recognition of the great work that we do. So looking forward to those presentations coming up. And the rest, you can read the rest of my report. I think there's some really great work going on. Some of it was reflected on the presentations you just received. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you much, Dr. Beta. Move over the committee and liaison reports. Nominating committee. I didn't nominate it yet. So
The student trustee.
Student trustee report.
It was definitely an interesting start to the spring semester with that snow day, but the initial welcoming activities went very well. Student corporations getting started, they are being pretty strict with their budgeting this semester and really taking a look at all the requests that come in and strictly adhering to our rules and regs on that. Other than that, they might come to you guys in the near future about some things that they're working on, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm very excited about next week. That is my report.
Thank you very much. Audit and ERM. Trustee Admiral.
No, next month will be the big report for the year, and Jason alluded to it in his presentation, so we'll look forward to the results of that next month.
Thank you. Board development, Trustee Mahalik is not here. Trustee Martin, do you have anything on? Okay, thank you. Personnel, Trustee Cushman's not here. Association, my report was on the desk. Foundation, Trustee Guy.
The foundation board met in January. And this year, the Vintner Valentine's numbers, they were able to enlarge it. It's a little over 200, wasn't it? And so that's going to be very, very, very large this year, which is good because it's a huge fundraiser. And they're getting very close to having Mueller finished. And you will be getting notification when they're going to have the dedication. And that's my report.
Thank you
Oh,
very
golf
much.
tournament. I'm sorry, I forgot golf tournament. That is in June. So if you're interested in the tournament, you can sign up. And also, they ask people if they can to make a basket. For
Well, in
raffle.
fact, you're talking about golf today. That's great.
Oh.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, because it was warm today. It was up to like 26 or 27, so it'll happen. All right, that's my report.
Thank you, Trustee Guys. The rest are from George Cushman and Donna Mahalik. They're not here, so we'll have to wait for the report next month. Oh, man, the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
Bye, Rich. I hope it's warm where you are. Although they were gonna have a frost.
Sure.